GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island's story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning and welcome to The Point on GB News with me, Andrew Pearce, and Bev Turner.
We've got a packed show today. Coming up, the government will announce a new task force to crack down on sexual abuse and exploitation. The plan will also include tougher sentencing for those involved in grooming gangs, who Suella Braverman has described as largely groups of men and almost all British Pakistani.
And of course, she's got flack for that, but I think she's saying what's got to be said. Now, the Home Secretary's also rejected claims that Brexit had anything to do with those huge delays at the port of Dover at the weekend. She said it was all where people were waiting up to 15 hours were caused by a combination of factors.
It's a bit vague. Former US President Donald Trump will be in New York today as he prepares for a legal battle over hush money payments to adult film star Stormy Daniels. Could Trump be the first ever US president to go to prison?
So as ever, let us know all your thoughts on all our talking points today. You email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk. We're going to get stuck into all those top stories, but first, here's your morning news with Aaron Armstrong.
Very good morning to you. It's 9:30. Let's get you up to date with the latest from the GB newsroom. Teachers in England will go on strike for another 2 days next term after rejecting the latest government pay offer. They will walk out on the 27th of April and the 2nd of May. 98% of NEU members voted against what they described as an insulting offer of £1,000 one-off payment plus an average rise of 4.5% increase for most staff next year. The NSPCC has warned focusing on race could create new blind spots when tackling child abuse. It's after the Home Secretary singled out British Pakistani men as a particular concern when it comes to grooming gangs. The Prime Minister is expected to reveal a raft of new measures to protect young women and girls later, including the use of ethnicity data to support investigations. Former Greater Manchester Police Detective Maggie Oliver says more investment and training is needed to combat gangs.
Police, the criminal justice system, CPS, the courts, they are on their knees. We are not going to bring about the monumental changes that we need without investment, without proper training of police officers. The sentencing is pitiful. The jails are full. Less than 2% of reported rapes and abuse ever reaches a court.
He murdered 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell in Liverpool is being sentenced later. Thomas Cashman was found guilty of killing Olivia as he chased a convicted drug dealer into their home in August last year. He was also found guilty of the wounding with intent of her mother, Cheryl Corbell, and the attempted murder of Joseph Nee, who he was chasing. He is due to be sentenced at Manchester Crown Court this afternoon. We'll keep you up to date with that when it comes in. Meanwhile, almost 1 million passport applications could face delays in processing because of a 5-week strike that begins today. More than 1,000 passport office workers across 8 sites are walking out. It's expected to have a significant impact. The PCS Union General Secretary has written to the government calling for urgent talks in a bid to resolve the matter. TV online, DAB, plus radio and on TuneIn 2. This is GB News. Now it's over to Andrew and Bev.
Well, the Prime Minister is going to announce details of a major task force to tackle grooming gangs and sexual abuse. It's part of a set of measures designed to protect women and girls.
The plan will also include tougher sentences for members of grooming gangs, with the Prime Minister pledging not to let political correctness get in the way of the crackdown.
It's going to be launched later today in Leeds and Greater Manchester, where the Prime Minister will meet survivors of the grooming gangs, as well as police officers who are part of the new unit.
Well, earlier GB News spoke to the partner at Hugh James Solicitors, Alan Collins, about how the new task force could impact the prosecution of such cases.
Lots of training, lots of safeguarding training. So the training is out there, but what we find is that the blinkers go on, or communities may think that the law doesn't apply to them. And so it's all about changing culture. There's been concern expressed that this is a measure designed to punish for failing to report. I think that's losing sight of the issue. The issue is about changing the ethos in many organisations so that they accept and appreciate that they've got an obligation to report any concerns.
Well, let's get more from our political reporter, Catherine Forster. Catherine, the Home Secretary is predictably run into a storm with Labour politicians in particular, because she's talking about how the grooming gangs have been largely British Pakistani men. And if you look back, Rotherham, Rochdale, Huddersfield, she's right.
She is, and she's not afraid to have this battle. The government are saying that they will stop at nothing to crack down on sexual exploitation of girls and women. And of course, we know that this has been going on for many, many years. The story of Rochdale was originally broken, I think, by the Times back in 2012. Places like Rotherham, places like Telford, like Newcastle, where this has gone on for years. And frankly, people in positions of authority have turned a blind eye for fear of being called racist, for fear of being called bigoted. So Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, Home Secretary Suella Braverman in Leeds today, first at an NSPCC hub, unveiling this grooming gang task force. Then they will be going over to Rochdale in Greater Manchester and talking to abuse survivors, amongst others. They are announcing a raft of measures. First of all, these task forces that they say they will parachute specialist officers into areas suffering from grooming gangs that are experienced and working in this field. Then they're going to have mandatory reporting of ethnicity information. Also, there will be a mandatory requirement for people working in positions of authority with children, so teachers, police, social care workers. If they suspect that a young person is being groomed, is being sexually abused, they have a legal responsibility to speak up. And also tougher sentences for people involved in grooming gangs. Now, they're talking tough on this. Of course, there has been pushback from Suella Braverman's comments that largely it's British Pakistani males that are involved. Tracy Brabin, Labour Mayor of the West Yorkshire, saying that this is dog whistle politics. But Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper saying that these government measures that are being announced today simply not going far enough. She's saying hopelessly inadequate, belated and narrow, and saying that Labour were calling for many of these measures some 10 years ago. But certainly lots of tough talk, and with local elections just a few weeks away, the government is really keen to make it clear that they are doing something, but words at the moment, and of course swift action really needed.
Catherine, isn't those remarks by the elected mayor go to the root of the problem? Because we know the Prime Minister in his speech today is going to say political correctness has been a barrier to weeding out these offenders, and it was misplaced political correctness because for fear, as you alluded to, for upsetting the British Pakistani community. It's not dog whistle politics at all. It's just saying what's been happening.
Yes, absolutely, and the data does bear this out. Sure, in broad terms, there's more sexual abuse carried out across the country by white men than men from an ethnic minority across the board. Simply, of course, because there are more white people in the country than there are ethnic minorities. But there are these very noticeable pockets of grooming gangs in towns up and down, specifically in the north of England, often Labour-led, led by British Pakistani men. And the government are saying that they've got to put these cultural sensitivities aside because hundreds, thousands indeed, of white working class young women have simply been ignored because people who should speak out don't want to be seen as racist, and that really that is unacceptable in this day and age. These people have a duty of care to do the right thing by these girls, and if they're going to be accused of racism, they have to take that on the chin.
OK.
Well, that's Catherine.
Thank you,
Forster.
Catherine.
I think she's being, yet again, outspoken and brave, the Home Secretary, and I think it's easier for her to say it because of her own ethnic origin. Her parents are from the Indian background, and likewise the Prime Minister's parents are Indian. It's much easier for them to say it, and if they don't say it, it means this political correctness is going to continue to grip policing.
I think it's a bit difficult, this, because largely political correctness is not something we should be frightened of in that, we just want language to reflect our reality. I think it's a bit of a strange phrase that they've used that. I think maybe what they should have maybe said is the fact that we just want to look at the facts and the data around it and look at this as... But it is very clever because it also, as you say, it positions both of them as not being afraid to say...
Absolutely. Much easier for two people who are of colour to say these things. But the fact is... of course, more white men commit sexual crimes. We know that. But then the ethnic population of this country is 14%. So statistically, obviously more white men are going to commit the crime. But the grooming gangs have been largely British Pakistani.
And I think what Catherine said then about cultural sensitivity, that's the question. That's the key phrase for me. Is there a cultural difference that needs to be addressed with some of these Pakistani men in these towns?
Who only attack white girls who they regarded as trash.
Absolutely.
Because a lot of those girls were very damaged.
Absolutely.
A lot of them living in care, broken homes.
Yeah. Well, earlier on, GBNews spoke to former detective of Greater Manchester Police, Maggie Oliver, about whether the government's efforts go far enough.
But what I fear, like Kelly, is that this is yet more rhetoric. It is all right saying, we are going to crack down on these grooming gangs. We are going to bring in specialist officers. Well, as Kelly rightly says, the police, the criminal justice system, CPS, the courts, they are on their knees. We are not going to bring about the, monumental changes that we need without investment, without proper training of police officers, You know, the sentencing is pitiful. The jails are full. Less than 2% of reported rapes and abuse ever reaches a court. So this, to me, you know, I have heard Priti Patel, I have had conversations with her, with Sajid Javid, saying the same things. I really hope that this is different, that these words convert into action. Louise Casey's report shines a spotlight on the Met. That could be any police force throughout the whole country. Policing is in crisis. There is a problem with attitudes, with cultures, with, you know, inexperienced officers. And, you know, we talk about a task force, which is great. But, you know, when I was in GMP, we had a serious sexual offences unit, which they closed down. Experienced police officers and detectives are leaving the police in their droves. Who is going to train a 19 or a 20-year-old recruit to deal with this? It's all very well to say the words. And I think my fear, to be honest, is this is, you know, a little bit of electioneering. We've got a general election coming up. The cat is out of the bag. I spoke about this 10 years ago, and you're quite right. When I started to speak out, you know, I was, I think, one of the very first people to say publicly that the grooming gangs were predominantly made up of Pakistani Muslim men. There is a problem within that culture that needs addressing, and we can't tiptoe around the edges and avoid dealing with it. But the last thing I would say is that the law in this country says a 12-year-old child or a 13-year-old child cannot have sex with a 50 or a 60-year-old man. That is against the law. So it doesn't matter for me where the abuser comes from. The law should be dealing with every single man, whether it's a priest in the Catholic Church, whether it is, you know, Jeffrey Epstein, or whether it is a Pakistani Muslim man. We need to throw the full weight of the law behind it. And, you know, a few words won't change the reality that these kids, as Kelly has said, have been judged.
Maggie Oliver, put her in charge.
She should chair the blooming task force, shouldn't she? Common sense, and she's dealt with it herself. We'll be talking more about that issue during the programme. Now, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer and the Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper, they're out and about today. They're going to Hartlepool as part of their campaign for the local elections in May.
The pair are to meet local community members following Labour's recent announcement of its plans to tackle antisocial behaviour.
Our political reporter, Olivia Utley's here with us now. I'm surprised you weren't rushing up the motorway to be with them. It sounds so exciting, Olivia.
Well, I think I got a bit of a preview of their plans. I went to an event which Yvette Cooper was speaking at last month, and she laid out her plans for Labour's policing. And essentially what they want to do is get 13,000 new bobbies on the beat, community policing, funded by preventing some of the inefficiencies that have crept into.
So they're not fully fledged police officers. They're what we call the ones that David Blunkett brought in.
Yes, exactly. Police community support officers.
Some people call them pretend police officers.
There's also quite a big question mark over whether the plans that they have to reduce inefficiencies in the police, which are all very well, will actually generate enough cash not only to pay the salaries of these 13,000 police officers, PCSOs, but to train them as well. The other big plan that Yvette Cooper and Keir Starmer are going to be talking about this morning are new respect orders they're bringing in, which is essentially to give more power to crack down on adults breaking antisocial behaviour codes. Now, the issue with this is that there is already a mechanism called the Community Respect Order, which the Conservatives have brought in, which would do exactly the same thing, but nobody knows about it. 94% of police officers don't know that this thing exists.
The police officers don't know.
The police officers don't know that this exists.
Pathetic.
So there is quite a big worry that Labour's plan essentially replicates what already exists. And the problem with that is that no one really knows about it in the first place, and it doesn't seem to be doing
Why don't they just make the existing one work?
Well, exactly. But Labour is very, very keen. Crime is just creeping up in focus groups at the moment, and Labour is very, very keen to show that it has a grip on this. And I was really interested in this event that I went to with Yvette Cooper. She was using very Blairite language. She was talking about tough on crime, tough on the causes of crime. And it's just a huge shift away from sort of the Corbynite politics that we've seen in recent years. They want to show that they're being tough. The issue is that their plans lack detail.
But remember, do you remember them? What were they called in the Blair years? ASBOs.
Yeah.
But they were
antisocial
high profile.
Order.
I mean, he got a bit carried away because he actually said that he would march offenders down to cash points and make them draw out cash out and pay a fine on the spot. Ridiculous.
Can't do that anymore. There's no cash points.
No cash. All been collected by banks. Exactly. But Is he right to be launching it today, Keir Starmer? Because isn't the Prime Minister's announcement and the Home Secretary's announcement going to dwarf what Labour are doing?
I think the idea is just to try and get attention away. They know that crime is a really important issue, and they know that on the issue of grooming gangs, Labour is very much on the back foot.
Because the local councils are traditionally solidly Labour-held
Exactly.
in the areas where it took place.
And Suella Braverman, as we heard from Catherine, is being very direct, saying that it is happening in Labour-run councils more often, and we know that sort of the issue of the idea of political correctness stopping people gathering the data on the ethnicity of the offenders is seen as a sort of left-wing problem. So this is Keir Starmer's attempt to try and get back on the front foot. But as you say, it might not work particularly well because there isn't a sort of big bang new policy in these announcements from Starmer and Cooper.
I was just looking to see whether Keir Starmer had reacted to this idea of the task force for the grooming gangs, and of course he has. And guess what he said? Starmer has said the vast majority of sexual abuse cases do not involve ethnic minorities after Sunak claims political correctness is protecting offenders. I mean, statistically, of course.
Yeah, he's right.
He's right. He said that as DPP, because he was obviously DPP, he said the green light to prosecute, he gave the green light to prosecute the Rochdale case, and that involved Pakistani men. But he said the vast majority do not involve ethnic minorities.
She's talking about grooming gangs. Rochdale, Rotherham, Huddersfield were the big three.
Yeah.
All British, Asian, Pakistani men. And it's been talked about before, about this, you were talking about this cultural issue, about a complete lack of respect for young white girls, who nobody listened to, Olivia. That was the tragedy of all of this. Some of them complained. They didn't listen. The police weren't interested. They were from broken homes. They lived in care homes. Some of them were involved in prostitution. Well, they don't count then, do they? They can be raped.
Well, exactly. And we know that, you know, tens of thousands of girls, the scale of these grooming gangs, I don't think many of us had really realised just even a couple of years ago. And some of the work that GBNews has been doing on bringing some of these issues to light has been so important. And it does seem strange to me that both Keir Starmer and actually Lisa Nandy have been acting as though sort of sweeping the issue under the rug.
Is she Shadow Foreign Secretary now, Lisa Nandy, or has she got another job? Shadow something, anyway. They chop and change. No, that's David Lammy.
Shadow Limit, sorry. But yeah, they've both been sort of trying to push it into the wider context of, obviously, it's not all ethnic minorities who are abusing young women. And of course, that is an important point to make. But the language that they're using sort of sometimes sounds as though they feel as though the grooming gangs isn't that important as a story, or as though the Conservatives are making too big a meal of it, which probably isn't really a vote winner in the run-up to the
and if
local
they
election.
got to grips with the first time, Maggie Oliver said she raised it, what was it, in 2012?
Yeah.
If it had been dealt with then, it might have stopped it spreading to other towns. And some of the Pakistani community leaders could have spoken out or spoken in the mosques and said to these guys, you've got to stop it.
Absolutely. And of course, there was Sarah Champion, the very brave Labour MP and Labour front bencher, who was sacked from her position on the Labour front bench, pushed out because she wrote a piece in The Sun explaining what the problem was. And that did just really cement the idea that Labour wasn't really taking it seriously. And Keir Starmer, this was under a previous Labour leader, but Keir Starmer is trying to turn around that impression. So I don't think he's taking the right tack.
Well, he's thinking of the Pakistani Muslim vote, voting for him,
as
opposed to the broader picture.
Yeah.
I think he needs to be perceived with care. I mean, they do seem to be on the front foot at the moment, the government, don't you think? Dominating the political agenda again.
Absolutely. I mean, the Conservatives have been creeping up in the polls week after week, and Rishi Sunak set himself a pretty low target, but what he said he wanted to do was be on around 30% of the vote in the polls by Easter, and he is now achieving that most of the time. So yes, it is a low bar, but the general election is still a way off. If he keeps showing that he can do this competent government, which he has excelled at with first the Windsor framework, everything that he's announcing today, then, you know, the idea that the next election is lost for the Conservatives certainly doesn't particularly hold water anymore.
Nobody's talking about Boris, are they?
No. Do we have to?
No. We'll be talking about it next when that Privileges Committee reports, because that's still sort of Damocles above Boris's head.
Of course, yeah, how quickly we forget. Right, we're going to be looking, thank you, Olivia, we're going to be looking at the government's crackdown on grooming gangs more in the next hour. You are with GB News.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst. Welcome to your latest broadcast from the Met Office. Plenty of sunshine over the next few days as high pressure is in charge, but it does turn a bit wetter later on in the week. And we can see that in the pressure pattern. High pressure just sat to the east of us, keeping these weather fronts at bay. However, Wednesday into Thursday, they will manage to move in, bringing some cloudy conditions and rain for a time. Before then, that high pressure builds back in for the Easter weekend. So this morning, a cold start out there. Frost in places, but quickly melting away. Plenty of sunshine to come through the day, though the cloud does thicken and move in across parts of Northern Ireland, Northern and Western Scotland, though it should generally stay dry here throughout the day. Best of the sunshine for much of England and Wales. Blue skies for everyone. Generally light winds. Chilly along the east coast. Temperatures still here struggling to get into double figures, 14 or 15 across some western areas in the best of the sunshine. Into the evening time, it will turn quite chilly as the sun begins to set under those clear skies. Cloud thickening for parts of Northern Ireland, Western Scotland still, but an increasing risk of some patchy rain and drizzle moving in here into the early hours. And just notice the blues returning on the map by the end of the night, indicating a frost out there. Temperatures falling close to, if not below, freezing. So it means a chilly start to Tuesday morning, some ice around first thing, but this will quickly melt away with that strong April sunshine. And then another fine day to come for many areas, just perhaps the Western Isles and parts of the Highlands seeing some patchy rain and drizzle at times. Northern Ireland should largely stay dry, but thicker cloud here through much of the day. And the sunshine also turning hazy for parts of North Wales, Northern England. Best of the blue skies holding on in the southeast. And again, temperatures similar, 11 to 14 for many. Over the next few days, we'll see bands of rain starting to move in. So Wednesday turning wetter and windier, particularly on Thursday, quite a cloudy day before the sunshine tries to return for Friday. Temperatures around average.
Well, I mean, obviously, Sunak's on the front foot at the moment because of politics, but, you know, the big issue for the Tories have also been not just the cost of living crisis, not just law and order, the NHS. I've got the headline on the front of The Guardian, Bev. NHS delays risk harming thousands of children.
I can believe it. We've got more strikes coming up as well next week. I had NHS experience on Thursday night.
Right.
When we left the studio here after we finished our show on Thursday, I got home making the kids' tea. My teenager rang from the side of the road and he'd fallen off his bike. Gone around a corner too quickly, back wheel came out. Anyway, he'd broken his collarbone.
Painful.
So really painful, and so we end up going to A&E. We go to what I presume is our local A&E department. We get there, it is like a war zone. There is not a single seat that isn't sat upon. The queue is out of the door, and the woman on reception stands up and just announces to the room, I should have gone home half an hour ago. She said, I'm thinking, well, that's not our problem, love. She said, but I'm staying here, I'm going now, and someone will be back at midnight. So if you want to, you can come back tomorrow morning.
Because she knows a lot of people who are in that waiting room shouldn't have been there in the first place.
Absolutely.
There's nothing wrong with them.
But what do you do with a teenager with a broken collarbone? So I went up to the front of the queue and I was like, I'm really sorry, but are you telling me to take my teenager home with his broken collarbone and come back in the morning? And she just shrugged at me. And I walked back down the queue and I just thought, this country is broken. How is that possible? Anyway, next thing, one of those very efficient women of a certain age with a lanyard around her neck comes out, the kind of women that can run the world. And she comes up and she can see that my son's in considerable distress. And she said, what are you here for? I explained it. She said, come in the back. And we went through then to what turned out, this was the A&E.
So where were you then?
Well, I thought I was in A&E. The front of the hospital is called Urgent Care Department, and it's run by a private company. And so when I get to the back, and the brilliant NHS staff, I mean, just amazing in the back. They said the front is hired out to a private firm that run urgent care, and she said everyone in there wants a prescription, they don't feel very well, they've got an ingrown toenail that no one's sorted out, they're trying to jump NHS queues.
And they can't get in to see their doctors.
And they can't get in to see their doctors. So we were beautifully looked after then.
But why is a private company running that?
I have no idea. I didn't know that was such a thing. So the urgent care department is basically tendered out to a private organisation. She said, well, they're understaffed, they're clearly making a lot of money, but they're not employing anybody in there to run the department.
And you see, Labour keep banging on about, Tories creeping privatisation. It's underway.
It's already underway,
yeah,
absolutely. And those contracts, I mean, people say, don't they, with the NHS, they just add another zero on it. If you know the NHS is going to pay for something, I can't imagine how much that company is being paid to run that particular department.
I think the trouble is with that story, Bev, I think that's just an experience that so many people around the country are sharing.
It's scandalous.
And you pay good money for your NHS through your taxes.
I know. I was about to get in a car and drive around to find another hospital. Luckily, this wonderful woman came and rescued us. Right, let us know your thoughts on all of our talking points today, won't you? And your experience of the NHS. GBviews at gbnews.uk.
How is he, by the way, your son?
He's all right. He's moaning quite a lot.
Right.
He's all right. He's in a lot of pain. Obviously, there's nothing more relaxing than having a 19-year-old with a broken collarbone in the
No, I
house.
can imagine. Now, still to come, we're going to continue our coverage of the crackdown on Grooming Gang, so stay with us.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank. My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning and welcome to The Point on GB News with me, Andrew Pearce, and Bev Turner.
Still to come this morning. The government will announce a new task force today to crack down on sexual abuse and exploitation. The plan will include tougher sentencing for those involved in grooming gangs, who Suella Braverman has described as largely groups of men and almost all British Pakistani.
predictably, that's caused a lot of controversy. The Home Secretary's also rejected claims that Brexit was anything to do with those huge delays at the port of Dover over the weekend. She said there were a number of factors, but she refused to allow Brexit to be one of them.
And former President Donald Trump will be in New York today as he prepares for a legal battle over hush money payments to adult film star Stormy Daniels. Could Trump be the first ever former US president to go to prison? Let us know.
Oh.
Don't mind. Go ahead.
You go. No, you do.
What we're both going to say is we want to hear from you. This morning, gbviews@gbnews.uk. You've all been getting in touch, a lot of you, about Suella Braverman's statement on the grooming gangs. But keep your messages coming, won't you? But first of all, here is the news with Aaron Armstrong.
Very good morning to you. It's just after 10 o'clock. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. The NSPCC's warned focusing on race could create new blind spots when tackling child abuse. It's after the Home Secretary singled out British Pakistani men as a particular concern when it comes to grooming gangs. The Prime Minister is expected to reveal a raft of new measures to protect young women and girls later, including the use of ethnicity data to support investigations. Former Greater Manchester Police Detective Maggie Oliver says more investment and training is needed.
Police, the criminal justice system, CPS, the courts, they are on their knees. We are not going to bring about the monumental changes that we need without investment, without proper training of police officers. The sentencing is pitiful. The jails are full. Less than 2% of reported rapes and abuse ever reaches a court.
The man who murdered 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell in Liverpool is being sentenced later. Thomas Cashman was found guilty of killing the schoolgirl as he chased a convicted drug dealer into her home in August last year. He was also found guilty of the wounding with intent of her mother, Cheryl Corbell, and the attempted murder of Joseph Nee, who he was chasing. He is due to be sentenced at Manchester Crown Court this afternoon. Teachers in England will go on strike for another 2 days next term after rejecting the latest government pay offer. They have announced they will walk out on the 27th of April and the 2nd of May. 98% of NEU members voted against what they described as an insulting offer of a £1,000 one-off payment plus an average rise of 4.5% increase. That's for next year, and that would be for most staff. Almost 1 million passport applications could face delays in processing because of industrial action. More than 1,000 passport workers across 8 sites have walked off the job for 5 weeks, with the Public and Commercial Services Union saying it will have a significant impact. The union's General Secretary has written to the government calling for urgent talks in a bid to resolve the matter. Nikki Kelvin, head of the travel website The Points Guy UK, says people may need to rethink their holiday plans.
There isn't a great way about it. The only way is to plan ahead. If you've got, if you want to get away in the coming weeks, but your passport has expired, you might need to look at your destination. You think about staying at home or going to Ireland, for example, where you can travel with just ID and not with a passport.
The queues at the entrance to the Port of Dover have been cleared after a weekend of disruption. That's according to P&O Ferries. Coach passengers faced a third day of frustration yesterday, some complaining of being delayed for up to 16 hours. And port officials have clashed with the Home Secretary over her claims the delays had nothing to do with Brexit. They say border processing times have increased sharply, as every passport has to be individually checked and stamped. Former US President Donald Trump will fly to New York later ahead of his court surrender to answer to criminal charges. Trump supporters in Florida are getting behind the former president. He's been charged in relation to hush money paid to an adult film star before the 2016 election. Trump is due to be arraigned, fingerprinted and photographed in the Manhattan courthouse tomorrow. His lawyer says he will enter a plea of not guilty. Russia's Wagner Group has claimed control of the Ukrainian town of Bakhmut. The head of the mercenary group says troops raised the Russian flag over the administration building in the eastern Ukrainian town. And they claimed they'd taken it from a legal point of view. Ukraine's military, though, have said Bakhmut and several other towns, including Avdiivka, remain at the epicentre of hostilities. Meanwhile, Russian investigators say the detained woman, Daria Trepova, is the suspect in the killing of a prominent war blogger. Yesterday, Vladimir Tatarsky was killed and at least 32 people were injured in an explosion at a cafe in St. Petersburg. Mr. Tatarsky was a vocal supporter of Russia's war in Ukraine. He had more than 500,000 followers on Telegram. Jodie Comer and Paul Mescal won top prizes for their West End debut performances at last night's Olivier Awards. Comer won Best Actress for her role as Tessa in a one-person production, Prima Facie, while Mescal took home the Best Actor for his role as Stanley Kowalski in the new stage adaptation of A Streetcar Named Desire. Congratulations to them. This is GB News, more as it happens, as always. But now it is back to Bev and Andrew.
You're quite right, they're pretty cross, aren't they?
Yes, absolutely. You've been getting in touch with your views on the grooming gangs. Richie says Yvette Cooper is now talking about grooming gangs. For years, Labour MP Sarah Champion was bringing the topic up and her colleagues rounded on her, with one Labour MP even sharing a tweet saying abuse victims should shut their mouths for the good of diversity.
And Jill says it's not more training the police need, but senior officers having the conviction to go and arrest the perpetrators, irrespective of their ethnic backgrounds.
Absolutely. Well, keep your views coming at your GB Views at gbnews.uk.
And on that subject, the Prime Minister is going to announce the details of this new task force to tackle grooming gangs. It's part of a wide-ranging series of measures designed to protect women and girls from sexual predators.
So the plan will also include tougher sentences for members of grooming gangs, with the Prime Minister pledging not to let political correctness get in the way of the crackdown.
It's being launched in Leeds and Greater Manchester, where the PM's going to meet victims, survivors, call them what you will, as well as officers who are going to be part of this new unit.
So earlier, GB News spoke to the partner at Hugh James Solicitors, Alan Collins, about how the new task force could impact the prosecution of such cases.
Lots of training, lots of safeguarding training. So the training is out there, but what we find is that the blinkers go on, or communities may think that the law doesn't apply to them. And so it's all about changing culture. There's been concern expressed that this is a measure designed to punish for failing to report. I think that's losing sight of the issue. The issue is about changing the ethos in many organisations so that they accept and appreciate that they've got an obligation to report any concerns.
So let's get more from the policing and crime commentator Danny Shaw. Hello, Danny. Good to see you. It's quite a change of rhetoric around the grooming gangs today, isn't it, from Suella Braverman and Rishi Sunak, to say we're not going to be preoccupied with cultural sensitivities. We're just going to point a finger at those who are committing these crimes and do something about it. Why that shift now, do you think?
Look, I think what this is about is the government trying to create a bit of a sort of culture battle, if you like, over this issue. There was some Home Office research that was published in 2020, and it said, although that there was a particular issue in Rochdale, Rotherham and Telford, where the perpetrators of the gangs were predominantly British Pakistani, in general, you cannot say across the country that grooming is an issue with one particular ethnic group. There are no links between ethnicity and this form of offending that could be proven. That is Home Office Commission research that was published in 2020. And I think it's very important to say that there are many perpetrators of this type of offence who are white, and there are victims who are not white, who may be black or Asian or from another ethnic group. I think that's very important to say that. I think what the government is doing is saying, look, you have to go after the perpetrators, whatever their ethnic background, and that is clearly right as well. You can't let political correctness get in the way. But I think what the government is doing and the way that they're sort of angling this is really to try and draw some kind of cultural divide between them and the opposition, and to make it a bit of an issue, if you like, for political reasons. That's what I think. Although I do think that having a focus on this issue is really important, and bringing the police forces together with a new task force is probably something that's long overdue.
Danny, at this point, we know that most sex offences are carried out by white men, but then what is the ethnic population here? 14.5%. Inevitably, it would be more white men. Isn't the point about the gangs, what the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister are saying is predominantly the grooming gangs that have gone to prison in the last decade have been predominantly British Pakistani men?
Well, I think what the Home Office research showed from 2 years ago, and I've got it here in front of me, is that the links between ethnicity and this form of offending could not be proven. That was Home Office research that a newspaper had to sort of chisel out of the Home Office under a Freedom of Information Act request because it wouldn't release it otherwise. So I do think we have to be very careful. There are clearly, as I've said, been particular issues in some locations with British Pakistani perpetrators, forming those gangs. But I think to make this an issue around colour or race, I think personally is a mistake, and I think is dangerous. This is an offence, and you should go after the perpetrators, whatever ethnic group, whatever background they come from, and go after them with a coordinated approach, which hopefully the National Crime Agency will be able to bring.
When you listen to people like Maggie Oliver, and also one of the ladies that's spoken out repeatedly, Sammy Woodhouse, who is a survivor of the Rotherham abuse, she's superb at articulating the problems that she faced and how ignored she was. There was a problem, and I'm using the past tense. I don't know categorically now whether this continues. There are people in those communities who say that this continues. There was a problem that police officers were not getting involved in these allegations because of cultural sensitivities, wasn't there? Because, of course, the police are always frightened of being accused of being racist or of being discriminatory against any particular group. So there was an issue that needed to be addressed. Has it gone away, do you think? Or will this statement today help that to go away?
I think what helped it was the inquiry into child sexual abuse, which reported last year, and which has exposed how those issues around cultural sensitivity, political correctness, whatever term you wish to apply to it, did get in the way. And I hope that is a wake-up call to police forces and other authorities. Police in particular have to police without fear or favour. Doesn't matter who you are, they have to go after people, whatever their position in society, whatever ethnic background. So hopefully that isn't happening, and it won't happen in the future. The government's clearly underlining it with what it's saying today, but my slight concern over the way that they're sort of angling their announcement is that they're wanting to create a sort of a divide for political reasons.
The police officers, though, Danny, because we've just had Dame Casey's report. The headline from that was, "The police is institutionally racist." And then you have Suella Braverman saying these gangs need to be pursued, regardless of what might appear to be racist behaviour. Very difficult for individual police officers to know how to get that balance right.
Well, I mean, Dame Louise Casey's report, Baroness Louise Casey's report, was concerned with the Met Police, the Metropolitan Police, not the entire police service of the UK or indeed England and Wales. And institutional racism in its processes, some officers are racist, she found in the Met, and the systems and the complaints procedure and so on. There were sort of processes within there that suggested that it was institutionally racist. I think that's quite different from some officers in other parts of the country who have been worried about going after particular grooming gangs or particular types of crime because they're concerned about cultural sensitivities or stirring up problems. Neither of those is right. Police have to approach every single case based on the evidence and where it takes them, no matter who the individual is, no matter what their ethnic background or where they come from, and so on. And that has to be their approach. And you see some fantastic investigations by police where they do that quite clearly, and they've fallen short in some of those historical inquiries that we've seen. But basically, this should be an effort that is focused on the perpetrators, no matter who they are or where they come from.
Just finally, Danny, also, I hear what you say about the perpetrators. We shouldn't forget the real tragedy here. The victims who were ignored, their cries for help were ignored by social services, schools, and the police. Often they were from broken homes, living in care. I think some of the girls attempted suicide. They were completely let down by the system.
Absolutely, they were let down not just by the police, but by other authorities as well. And that's why it's so important that you have an approach whereby you go where the evidence is, and you cannot be deflected from that. And you know, it's also very important that when you launch an investigation where you know that perhaps there may be some people who are disturbed because it could raise local sensitivities, you bring the community with you and you explain to the community what you're doing. You're there to root out wrongdoing, criminality and so on. And that's the way that actually you approach these investigations. You bring communities with you as well as going without fear or favour.
Thank you, Danny. Crime commentator Danny Shaw there. Do you know what I mean about the police, though? It's like they're damned if they do and they're damned if they don't. I know that Dame Casey report was just the Met, but there's no reason to think that those issues are confined to the Met.
Of course. Well, this is a huge story, isn't it, with the Prime Minister announcing later today the duties of the task force. We're going to get more on this issue from our documentary filmmaker, Charlie Peters.
Hello, Charlie. Good morning. You made a nice film for GB News where you went and investigated the Grooming Gang. So what do you make of this announcement today? To what extent was the fact that race and culture played a part in those crimes? To what extent will that be more tolerable, more manageable after these statements today?
Well, Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, will be arriving here in Rochdale later today to meet with police chiefs, survivors and indeed child abuse specialists to discuss the raft of new plans that the government has announced this morning. The chief of which is this new task force to investigate child grooming gangs wherever they are found. I think the key detail that has been missed from this discussion so far this morning is that this task force is being supported by the NCA, the National Crime Agency, which has enjoyed so much success in Rotherham under Operation Stovewood. You'll remember, of course, that in Rotherham, the J report in 2014 found that 1,400 girls had been abused from 1997 to 2013. But when the National Crime Agency was brought in very soon after that report was published, it's actually revised that figure up to 1,510 and made dozens of more prosecutions and convictions. And so the NCA, being parachuted in with their specialist officers to the various local police forces, should make a significant difference. And indeed, if any GB News viewers recognise that policy, it's because they would have heard it in the documentary recommended back in February. There's also a few more recommendations being made, including mandatory reporting being announced very soon. And we're also going to see more efforts on the collection of data ethnicity. Now, you've just heard from your commentator there about the issue of the Home Office report in 2020, which said that it was impossible to know the truth about the ethnic links to this crime due to a lack of available data. Well, now it is hoped that more data collection will be achieved, which will allow for a better understanding. But even with the limited data that the Home Office had in 2020, it found that British Pakistanis were vastly overrepresented in this kind of abuse.
Charlie, how does this task force operate? If there's reports of child grooming, sex grooming, does the task force go en masse to the town or city where it happens? And how big and how many people are on it and how experienced are the people who are doing the investigating?
Well, I'll be exclusively interviewing the Home Secretary later to get more details about this new task force. But in Rotherham, under Operation Stovewood, the National Crime Agency essentially took over investigations into historical child sexual exploitation, pouring in hundreds of millions of pounds to launch new investigations with hundreds of new officers, and really ventured to areas where South Yorkshire Police had failed. Operation Linden, an investigation into the efficacy of South Yorkshire Police, found gross and widespread failures. And the reason why the NCA has been so successful in Rotherham and throughout South Yorkshire is because they were able to bring in and look under stones that were previously unturned. And so in the documentary in February, we uncovered up to 50 different towns and cities where we believe that these grooming gangs have credible reports of them going on. But the National Crime Agency has only been to one. With this new task force, perhaps they will find new towns to investigate.
OK, thank you very much, Charlie. Charlie Peters there. Well, I'm just reflecting. What I find fascinating about the concept of the grooming gang is how there must be trust. Do you know what I mean? Like, you think if you are a sexual predator and you are abusing one individual person on your own, you're probably, I imagine, doing everything you can to make sure that nobody knows about that. What I find fascinating in the gang concept is that they were all doing it.
Yeah, they were sharing the girls.
Sharing girls, but also, like, managing to keep that a secret amongst that many people.
And
that's what makes my blood run cold.
And what did their women folk know about it? Did they know? Did they turn a blind eye? Did it matter?
So many questions.
And what did the elders in the mosques, we're talking about the grooming gangs, particularly the Home Secretary's chosen Rochdale for good reason, because that was one of the more notorious grooming gangs. So, look, we're going to carry on talking about this because it's a huge story. It's still to come, though. The extraordinary Donald Trump. A criminal indictment tomorrow. He's going to arrive in New York today. What could this mean for the presidential election in 2024? I think it's going to enhance his prospects. No flipping end. This is To The Point on GB News.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island's story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Very good morning, it's 10:24. You're with To The Point on GB News with me, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce.
Now, breaking up the Metropolitan Police is possibly being considered by the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman. That's after, of course, the devastating report by Baroness Louise Casey.
The Home Secretary was open about the problems the force is currently facing, but said Sir Mark Rowley was the right person to take it forward. So joining us now is the former Met officer, Chris Hobbs. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning.
So this is the response to Dame Casey's report. No change. Am I right in interpreting it like that?
Well, it's had a massive impact on the workforce. In terms of morale, it's sort of fallen through the floor. There's a bit of uncertainty. Armed police, obviously the ones who got slated in the report, are less than happy with some of the comments that have been made. So there is a morale problem amongst officers who still have to do the policing 24 hours a day, and by and large do it pretty well. So if we're not careful, we're going to throw the baby out with the bathwater, and we're going to be left with a police service that is very low morale and is really going to struggle. There are some positives, but
what are the positives?
Well, what they do on a 24-hour basis.
Right, yeah. Their job, because we shouldn't remember most police officers do a good job and do their best.
I think that's absolutely right, and I think the problem is now that if you're confronted, for want of a better term, with a white male police officer, then the way it's gone with the media and the publicity, you're going to think, what am I dealing with here? A misogynistic, racist, homophobe.
Yeah.
And the majority aren't. We do have, or the Met have problems. There are pockets of, but they number hundreds. We've got something like, last 10 years, 60,000 male Metropolitan Police officers and staff. The Commissioner's looking back over 10 years, seeing what may have gone wrong in terms of investigations. But that's 60,000. Imagine, we spoke the other day, at a football stadium, the Emirates, 60,000 capacity. You beam up, even if it is hundreds, you're still left with a workforce that, by and large, is good, trustworthy, but at the moment, is suffering because they're all being stigmatised, they're all being collectively smeared, and that's something the Commissioner has to be very much aware of, as has the Home Secretary, because if you take the police away, you've got nothing.
What difference do you think it will make to the police officers to hear Suella Braverman say today that political correctness shouldn't get in the way of chasing down the bad guys?
Well, it shouldn't, but equally, of course, it's something that police officers have to be acutely aware of. If you do a stop in the street and it's of someone from an ethnic minority and it attracts a crowd and that individual isn't being cooperative and there's a complaint, then you've obviously got a problem. The issue with grooming gangs, now that is now being tackled. But it obviously wasn't because of issues around political...
But she's getting flack for saying, predominantly, the grooming gangs were British Pakistani men. The Prime Minister, I think, is going to say the same thing. She's getting a lot of flack from the Labour Party. That's saying it's nasty dog whistle politics.
I think there is an issue, obviously, in certain towns and cities where you've got gangs of young Pakistani men who are grooming. But I think on balance as well, and I think there's been some research, there are also an awful lot of white groomers out there. On the internet. We found them in the church, haven't we? We found them in sports coaches. So I think it crosses divides. But obviously with these particular gangs, yes, there is an issue. But it goes across the board. So if there is a special unit set up, it's going to have to look across the board at groomers, not just at Pakistani grooming gangs, but at those from white groups and so on.
It'll need people from that community on the task force.
Well, yes, and this is where you need good relationships with that community. And that's something that certainly in the Met has been neglected and something that hopefully is going to be built up over the next few years because it is essential. You want the community on your side in tackling this sort of problem.
OK, thank you, Chris. So from one police officer, someone who's having his collar felt, former US President Donald Trump is expected to travel to New York today ahead of his scheduled arraignment tomorrow. New York City police have placed metal barriers around Trump Tower, blocked the roads around Manhattan as they prepare for potential protests. World Chair of the Republicans overseas, Greg Swenson, is with us now. Can you believe this is happening, Greg?
I can. Yeah, it's been telegraphed for a few weeks now, but it's also been going on for 7 years. You know, with the Russia collusion hoax, which turned out to be a complete fabrication. A lot of investigations during his administration. You had 2 impeachments. You know, this is a long process of getting Trump, which is is actually the campaign slogan that Alvin Bragg ran on in New York, who's bringing this case this week.
You couldn't write a better campaign strategy for him if you tried.
It's really amazing. I think it's, in many cases, backfiring unless you think that they're actually doing it on purpose. There are enough smart people in the Democratic machine that, you know, either Barack Obama or Susan Rice would, you know, make a phone call and say, this is going to play right into Trump's hands, or maybe that's what they want because they want him to win the nomination.
Millions more pouring into his election coffers
already. It's been an absolute fundraising, you know...
4 in 5 Republicans think it's a stitch-up.
It really is amazing. His numbers have gone up. That's predictable because the same thing happened after the raid on Mar-a-Lago. But he's been a fundraising machine since the news came out a few weeks ago, and even since Thursday. So, this is something that benefits Trump in the near term for sure. Yeah.
Just remind people the basics of this. What has he actually been? What is he in trouble for?
It's a real stretch. It has to do with this alleged affair that he had 17 years ago with Stormy Daniels, a film star of sorts. And,
yes.
And then 7 years ago, he allegedly made a payment for hush money, which is kind of a common practice now in politics in America. Paid some hush money, and what Alvin Bragg is trying to do is connect that somehow to campaign finance violations.
So
it's
he's
a
the
real
Attorney
stretch.
General. So he's the Attorney General,
yes,
isn't he?
The Manhattan DA, yes.
And this is because Trump's lawyer, I was explaining this story to my kids the other day, and even my 14-year-old said, was Trump that stupid? Because I think it was $130,000 that the lawyer paid.
That's right.
To Stormy Daniels.
That's right.
And then Donald Trump paid the lawyer the exact same fee, $130,000.
Yeah, I think he bumped it up just, for support. But
and just help us understand, Rick. And is it the idea that therefore, and then Trump tried to pass that off from a tax point of view as campaign finance?
Well, no, he tried to write it off as a business expense, meaning I have a lawyer on retainer, which is perfectly legal and common. So, it was just legal expenses. And now you would argue that he could have made the hush money payment, because he didn't want to ruin his marriage, or he didn't want to face some sort of social, he didn't want to be a social outcast.
So why did he do it this way?
I think, you don't want to do it in a very obvious way, right? So he just had his lawyer pay. I mean, it's not really that crazy. And it did not come from the campaign or campaign funds.
It's his money.
Now, exactly, which is better. Yeah. But what they're trying to do, what Alvin Bragg is trying to do, is imply that because it was during a campaign or right before a campaign, he's connecting the dots and saying, I know that the Trump company paid for it, but it might as well have come from campaign funds. Jonathan Edwards, a two-time Democratic candidate for president, he actually did pay his hush money to his mistress with campaign funds. Right. And so he got in some trouble for it, didn't end up being convicted. Yeah. But so this is a real stretch. And most legal scholars are saying that this is not a case that you can really lean on.
And is it normal that it's going to be filmed? He's going to be filmed being charged? Is that normal in America?
At the very least, there'll be photographs. Right. So this is uncharted territory, Andrew. It's a great question, but it's never been done, a sitting president, which just shows you that the Democrats are not afraid to break norms. They're really breaking norms here. There's going to be some unintended consequences, very unpredictable. As I said, it's helping Trump in the near term. Hopefully it'll expose some of the unseemliness in these Soros-backed DAs around the U.S. Yeah. It's been ignored for the most part by corporate media. So this might be a moment where people ask questions. Why is George Soros paying? Why did he pay $1 million for Alvin Bragg's campaign? Why are they doing that in Chicago and New Orleans and Baltimore, where crime is up? It's absolutely insane how the crime problem has gone up, because DAs like Alvin Bragg are spending taxpayer money and time on prosecuting Trump, getting Trump,
political ambition
without considering the actual violent felons that are being released by Alvin Bragg.
Thank you, Craig. Greg Swenson. And if you are watching on the TV, that very dark shot that you can see, the sun will be rising very soon. This is live Trump Watch on our GB News YouTube channel.
So that's his jet.
For when all the action begins. That's Donald Trump's jet, and no doubt he will be getting out of it at some point. And who knows when they will descend upon him. Right, thank you, Greg.
Going to be great political theatre.
Quite a drama, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, he likes drama.
Right, still to come. Is Britain ready to go cashless or checkbookless, as we established with you last week, Andrew Pierce? We're going to be debating that as we go through the papers in just a few minutes. First, here's your latest headlines.
It is 25 to 11. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. The NSPCC's warned focusing on race could create new blind spots when tackling child sex abuse. It's after the Home Secretary singled out British Pakistani men as a particular concern when it comes to grooming gangs. The Prime Minister is expected to reveal a raft of new measures to protect young women and girls later, including the use of ethnicity data to support investigations. The man who murdered the 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell in Liverpool is being sentenced later. Thomas Cashman was found guilty of killing the schoolgirl as he chased a convicted drug dealer into her home in August last year. He was also found guilty of the wounding with intent of her mother, Cheryl Corbell, and the attempted murder of Joseph Nee, who he was chasing. Teachers in England will go on strike for another 2 days. Next term, after rejecting the latest government pay offer, they'll walk out on the 27th of April and the 2nd of May. 98% of NEU members voted against what they've described as an insulting offer of a £1,000 one-off payment, plus an average rise of 4.5% in their pay for most staff next year. Almost 1 million passport applications could be delayed in processing because of industrial action. More than 1,000 passport workers across 8 sites are walking off the job from today for 5 weeks, with the Public and Commercial Services Union saying it will have a significant impact. The union's General Secretary has written to the government calling for urgent talks in a bid to resolve the dispute. TV, online, DAB, Plus Radio and on TuneIn 2. This is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2334 and €1.1371. The price of gold is £1,593.80 per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is at 76.93.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very good morning. It's 10:40. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Beth Turner, and Andrew Pearce.
Well, we're going to go through this morning's papers, and we love this bit of the programme because we've got lovely Bushra Sheikh, political commentator, and my Daily Mail colleague, Sarah Vine. But before we dive into the papers, what do you think of Donald Trump?
Can't stand him.
Right.
Think he's awful.
Have you always felt like that? Have you changed your opinion on him?
Yes, I have a little bit, because I didn't. At first, I just thought he was a bit of a sort of buffoon, really, and actually over the years, I think he's actually quite malicious. I mean, I think the Capitol Hill thing was what really turned it for me, because I just think inciting people to kill, I mean, to do violence is not a good thing. I think there's a sort of certain biblical kind of justice in the fact that he's now being brought down by a porn star, who he paid hush money to, and who only had sex with him because he promised her that he'd get her on his show, The Apprentice, and then of course he didn't do it. Yeah. So it's just grubby. He's just grubby on so many levels.
If he put her on that programme, none of these problems would be.
I just think you don't. I mean, it's all very grubby. The whole thing is just. I just sort of think it's not. If you're the President of the United States of America, I expect a little bit better of you.
And those tawdry revelations about
I mean,
his
not that
performance
Biden is any
bed.
better. Yeah.
Tawdry he was hopeless in bed, Bushra.
I mean, I don't really want to think about that, to be honest, but we know this is all about power, isn't it? And because he can do it. It's his ego. It's,
Do you think he wears his orange makeup in bed?
Oh, he must do.
Oh, imagine the pillowcase.
Yeah, be ruined.
I met him once at a thing at Buckingham Palace, and spoke to his wife for a very long time because he was too busy being important.
Was this when he was president?
This is when he was president. This is when he came for the state visit.
Oh, yeah.
And he is just, as you would expect, just a sort of gigantic intergalactic ego circulating around a room. She seems quite nice.
And she's still with him.
Yeah.
I mean, we all speculated, didn't we, when he left the White House, first thing, she'd pack her bags and she'd be off.
Yeah. I tell you what, though, if I had a choice between Biden in the White House or him, I'd go for Trump, and I can't believe I'm saying that.
That's a desperate choice, though, isn't it? That is a desperate choice. It is a desperate choice.
Because, I mean, they're saying that Biden's not coming to the coronation because it's too much for him.
Probably. I mean, I just wish the Republicans would get someone better.
Yes.
Please...
Ron DeSantis.
Exactly. I mean, there are other people. It doesn't have to be Donald Trump,
Right, what else are we talking about this morning, ladies? Are we going to be discussing the story of the day, which is Suella Braverman saying that in relation to the grooming gangs, police officers, council workers, all the people around those sorts of stories shouldn't be hamstrung by political correctness. Bushra, what do you make of this?
Well, firstly, there's so many different parts of Suella speaking about grooming gangs. I mean, the main thing that we need to tackle here is there are young, vulnerable children.
Quite right, too. They're the victims here.
Yeah, so they are the victims. So what I don't like is this distraction where she is using language which is so divisive, and I get that there is an element of the Pakistani community that are involved. However, this is a wider problem. This isn't just a problem with the Pakistani community, and we do know this because when it comes to paedophilia, sexual assault, all of that stuff, these are men. These are violent perpetrators who are finding these young children and grooming them. So, so on one hand, she's kind of race baiting in a way. She's causing this tension, and it's taking away from what we should be focusing on.
But I think when the Rotherham gang went down, the Home Secretary at the time was Sajid Javid, who said, "Good, these revolting Asian paedophiles are going to prison," and he speaks as a man of Indian descent.
You know what, Look, on one hand, obviously, as a person of colour, coming from the Pakistani community, I genuinely feel like we need to tackle what the issue is. We know that the system is still broken, whether we want to admit this or not. And I know that Rishi Sunak is saying, oh, we've got this new task force, they're going to go in and this is all going to be better. It's not, because we don't have the numbers. We know that the Met Police is intrinsically misogynistic and they're racist. So how are we going to tackle an issue, let's say, even if it is with the South Asian or the Pakistani community, if they are racist? This is a concern, and it's a genuine concern of mine, because we have to be worried about children. We have to be.
Sarah, what do you think?
Well, I don't think paedophilia is exclusive to the Pakistani community. I think, you know, the whole point that they're trying to make is that this sort of policing needs to be colour-blind and race-blind and religion-blind. I mean, there are plenty of, you know, the paedophile rings in Belgium. I mean, you know, it's not as though it's a kind of... So I think we need to be very careful to not... The problem with the whole original Grooming Gang thing was that the policing was not done then because of racial sensitivities. They just need to learn lessons from that and make sure that they don't allow that to get in the way.
But do you think she's race-baiting, the Home Secretary, or
no,
she's
I
saying
don't
the
think
unsayable?
I think she's just saying the unsayable, which is to say, you know, don't hold back. But I mean, it is true that it's difficult because the Met have been found to be institutionally racist on a number of occasions, so it's difficult. They're trying to tread a fine line. I think Bushra's point about vulnerable children is also very important, because these girls, you know, shouldn't be exposed to these sorts of people, regardless of where they come from, whether they're from, you know, Muslims or whatever they happen to be. The point is there is a group of very vulnerable children who fall prey to these sorts of people, and that's because they're in care, or they're not being properly looked after, or they're not...
And therefore nobody listened to them.
So basically any opportunistic person, regardless of who they are or where they come from, can just exploit them, and that's a big issue.
Bushra, just with your kind of insight into the Pakistani community, how are these, or how have they been, and as far as we know, I keep talking about it in the past tense, this problem hasn't gone away, how are they able to keep these crimes secret amongst so many people?
I don't know whether it's just an individual thing within an actual community, because the first thing is that crime is one of those things that is always tried to keep. People try to keep that a secret anyway. Like, if you're doing a crime, why would you want anyone to know about it? So, you know, so my position on this is still the same. These are just crimes. These are not only white girls. We have to be very, very careful. They are all different colours of girls involved in this, and it's worrisome, because if you start saying that it's a targeted audience, you then are going to miss out if it's happening to other children. And you know, going back to the fact that it's been kept a secret, I don't think it's been kept a secret. I genuinely don't think that. I just think that these gangs are very, very smart, and the way that they do it, it's tactical. It's also a lot of manipulation, and some of these young girls don't even know it's happening to them.
Yeah.
You know, so it takes some time for them to actually realise that they are being groomed.
And they think, this man loves me.
Exactly.
He buys me things. He looks after me.
And we've got to think about how are these children in this position where they believe that a total stranger is going to love them more than their family?
But also,
are they not being loved at home? Have they not?
Don't have
but also
family.
there is an element of sort of judgmentalism on the girls themselves, because, you know, in the Rochdale scandal, a lot of the problem was that people thought they were that sort of girl.
Yes, that's right.
You know, that they were the sort of girls that do that sort of thing, and therefore they were devalued in the eyes of the kind of people who should be protecting them.
The police and social services didn't...
No, the police and social services. So there's this sort of notion that they're bad girls, and that, you know, this happens to girls of that sort of...
That they
that's sort of misogyny as well.
Yeah. They deserved it, but also the idea that they were benefiting because he might have bought her a new coat, he might have taken her out for a nice lunch. The idea that it almost like a prostitution arrangement is how they were depicted. They were children.
So there was a sort of element of slut-shaming, if I can say that.
Yeah, of course.
And I think that's also something that we need to look at, because it's how we judge vulnerable people in society who, you know, maybe haven't had the best start or haven't got the best protections and do stupid things and end up in trouble. You know, it's not always... We shouldn't perhaps always be so judgmental.
Shall we move on to a slightly lighter story?
Okay, this is my obsession.
But
is this the
yes, it is.
This parking?
It's my obsession as well. This is the parking
Anyone with
story.
a car, I'd have thought.
Yeah, the fact that we can no longer pay for our parking with money, or even often with a card, but you need the app on your phone. Go on, Sarah.
I mean, I just think the whole problem with modern life is you can't do anything. I mean, it's not just parking. Everything has to be done on your phone or on your computer, and that is an absolute tyranny. But the number of times I have helped sort of elderly gentlemen standing by a parking meter looking utterly baffled.
You're probably talking about me.
And I mean, on twice, I have actually taken their phones, signed them up, put in their details, helped them with their... And, you know, they trust me because, I mean, I have no idea. I could just steal all their stuff.
Yeah.
What about the motorist who doesn't have a mobile phone, Sarah?
No, exactly.
There's
What if
a
you don't?
lot of them.
Or what if your phone's run out of battery?
Yeah.
You know, there's no other option.
In a poor signal area.
I mean, I would like to start an analogue resistance. #analogue resistance, because I think this is enough of this digitisation of our lives.
It's a poll commissioned by the Mail found that more than half of over 65s do not feel like using parking apps such as Ringo and Pay by Phone. It drives my partner nuts.
But also, you know, I'm trying to get through to the people who supply my energy because obviously they don't answer the telephone.
They don't.
And you ring up and they say, "Oh, you can do it much faster and easier online." No, I can't because I've tried and it doesn't actually work.
Yeah, I know.
Because computer says no.
I want to speak to a person.
And at the moment, we're talking about AI taking over our lives. You know, this sort of binary refusal to do stuff. This is what we're facing.
Yeah. What do you think, Bushra? It's both a blessing and occasionally, but it's also a massive curse.
I'm totally fine with the apps.
Oh.
It's so easy to have it on your phone. My phone's always fully charged. I make sure when I go out, because I need to get in touch with the children.
Look at you, misorganised.
Yeah, but you're social media queen.
You're misorganised.
And you know what? I've never had an issue with calling them up, even if I haven't used the app. I think some of them, it can get a little bit frustrating when you need to have different apps for different areas. So I've never had an issue calling them up. They're very quick.
The poll in the Mail today, Bushra, 78% of people think it's unfair to remove parking meters because it discriminates against older people. And we shouldn't. Why are we always discriminating against older people?
Yeah, look, you know, I've got a soft place in my heart for for people that are older and stuff. But also, this is also good for them. You know, they can also move with the times and understand that things are changing.
They want to put a pound in the.
They might not have
machine.
anybody to help them move with the times. I was talking to a gentleman the other day. Doesn't have a bank account, doesn't have an email, doesn't have access to the internet, and he's only 65. And he said, "I can't function anymore in life."
OK, so let's say, you know, the one thing is we're not carrying a lot of cash around these days. I mean, I certainly don't. And also, when you are using cash in the machines, they don't work all the time either.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're banging on these machines. You're like, why isn't there...
Cash. I've always got cash on me. I've got pound coins as well.
I hardly have cash on me anymore. I just have cards. I might have a couple of quid in the card.
And I suppose you think the chequebook is prehistoric.
Of course, the cheque.
Well,
Andrew, who uses that?
I have a chequebook. I also have an Oyster card, so that I'm told that that's going out of fashion.
Yeah, I mean, it's about choice, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean,
we're being bullied. That's what this is about.
But also, it's about tracking us. It's you know, so now if you park on your parking app, they know that you were in wherever it was, Basingstoke at 3 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon.
It's an anti-motorist tyranny because the state seems to hate motorists.
Oh, no, it doesn't seem to. It just does. Yeah, I don't think there's any question over that.
Try and drive around London.
Should we do one more quick story?
Yes.
Let's talk about Jodie Comer, looking stunning at the Olivier Awards. Do you like Jodie Comer, Bushra? Best known for Killing Eve, was it?
Yeah. I felt, I mean, gosh, she's got absolute stunner, absolute talent. I think we need more women like her to be in the limelight.
She can do so many accents as well, can't she?
Amazing. It's such a skill to have, you know. And for me, it's all about women empowerment. And I know it's such a cliche, but it is because we do need more women out there showing us what we can do.
I've never heard of the play. Prima facie.
She's part of that sort of generation of British female stars like, Fleabag woman, what's she called? Phoebe Waller-Bridge and Pugh.
Yeah, Florence Pugh.
They're all sort of, they're very bright, they're very talented, they're quite sassy.
They're going to dominate, aren't they?
Yeah, they're really sort of, I mean, there's a little soft power thing going on there.
Great British talent, and she's amazing. And I saw her on Killing Eve, and then I saw her in an interview and realised she was a Scouser. I didn't expect that from her.
You wouldn't have thought that from her accent. By the way, do you know how much it is to go and see James Norton, Philip Norton, get his kit off in that play?
No. James Norton.
It's £150 a ticket.
Might be worth it. He's naked from start to finish.
I know. I'm not sure I want to see a naked man running around.
Apparently he's rather impressive.
Right, let me go to a few of your views this morning as well. Dave has got in touch to say the people in the Home Office who produced the report are part of the problem. They're producing a report designed to pacify the majority of the population. This is about the grooming gangs. And Simon says a report from 3 years ago. What relevance is that now? A report 3 years ago must have started 6 years ago.
And listen, David sums it up. Why didn't Keir Starmer prosecute the grooming gangs when he was Director of Public Prosecutions?
Good question.
Very good question, David, and it's a question we'll ask him.
Right, keep your views coming to us this morning, gbviews at gbnews.uk. Still to come, we'll continue our coverage of the government's plan to crack down on those grooming gangs.
Hello, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office. Following, for some parts of the south, the dullest March on record today. Plenty of April sunshine, light winds, dry for the vast majority as high pressure over Scandinavia builds towards the UK, keeping weather systems away for the time being and keeping sunny skies in place for much of the country. That sunshine extending from Scotland into England and Wales, just some patchy cloud about here. Northern Ireland seeing a bit more cloud, I think, and a fresher breeze, but for the vast majority it's dry, it's bright, and with the sunny skies and the light winds feeling pleasantly warm, 11 to 14 Celsius for most. Now into the evening, under those clear skies, temperatures will fall away and it could be a few mist and fog patches forming here and there. But for the vast majority, it is a clear night, and as a result, it's a frosty night with temperatures dipping to +1 down to -3 Celsius across central and eastern parts. I think for western Scotland and Northern Ireland, here we'll see thicker cloud and by dawn, a few outbreaks of mostly light rain into the Western Isles. That's skirting Caithness, Sutherland and then arriving into Orkney later in the morning. Northern Ireland, a few bits of rain in the far west first thing and then further rain arriving by the end of the afternoon, and that's more extensive rain arriving into the Outer Hebrides as well. But across the rest of the UK, it's largely dry and bright. Plenty of sunshine towards the southeast, 13 to 15 Celsius, so another relatively mild day. Into the evening, though, it turns cloudier across Scotland, northern and western England, Wales and Northern Ireland. And for Northern Ireland and western Scotland, we'll see some outbreaks of light rain. That rain crossing much of the UK during Wednesday, clearing to showers on Thursday, drier again by Friday.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one.
Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like
Absolutely.
on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
Is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Good morning and welcome to The Point on GB News with me, Andrew Pearce, and Bev Turner.
Lots still to come this morning. The government will announce a new task force today to crack down on sexual abuse and exploitation. The plan will also include tougher sentencing for those involved in grooming gangs, who Suella Braverman has controversially described as largely groups of men and almost all British Pakistani.
And good for her for saying it, in my view. The Home Secretary's also rejected claims that Brexit is anything to do with those huge delays at the port of Dover over the weekend. She said the queues, which saw people waiting up to 15 hours, they've gone, by the way, the queues, were caused by a combination of factors, but not Brexit.
Former US President Donald Trump will be in New York today as he prepares for a legal battle over hush money payments to adult film star Stormy Daniels. Could Trump be the first ever former US president to go to prison?
Don't forget, we want all your thoughts on all our talking points. You know what to do. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk. We're going to get stuck into all those stories today. But first, let's get the latest headlines with Aaron Armstrong.
Good morning to you. It's just after 11 o'clock. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. The NSPCC's warned focusing on race could create new blind spots when tackling child sexual abuse. It is after the Home Secretary singled out British Pakistani men as a particular concern when it comes to grooming gangs. The Prime Minister is expected to reveal a raft of new measures to protect young women and girls later, including using ethnicity data to support investigations. Former Greater Manchester Police Detective Maggie Oliver says more investment and training is needed.
Police, the criminal justice system, CPS, the courts, they are on their knees. You know, we are not going to bring about the, monumental changes that we need without investment, without proper training of police officers. The sentencing is pitiful. The jails are full. Less than 2% of reported rapes and abuse ever reaches a court.
The man responsible for the murder of 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell in Liverpool is being sentenced later. Thomas Cashman was found guilty of killing the schoolgirl as he chased a convicted drug dealer into her home in August last year. He was also found guilty of the wounding with intent of her mother, Cheryl Corbell, and the attempted murder of Joseph Nee, who he was chasing. He's due to be sentenced at Manchester Crown Court this afternoon. Teachers in England will go on strike again another 2 days next term after rejecting the latest government pay offer. They've announced they will walk out on the 27th of April and the 2nd of May. 98% of NEU members voted against what they've described as an insulting offer. It amounted to a £1,000 one-off payment, plus an average rise of 4.5% for most staff next year. Almost 1 million passport applications could be facing delays in processing because of industrial action. More than 1,000 passport office workers across 8 sites are walking off the job from today for 5 weeks, with the Public and Commercial Services Union saying it will have a significant impact. The General Secretary has written to the government calling for urgent talks in a bid to resolve the matter. Nikki Kelvin, head of the travel website The Points Guy UK, says people may need to rethink their holiday plans.
There isn't a great way about it. The only way is to plan ahead. If you've got, if you want to get away in the coming weeks, but your passport has expired, you might need to look at your destination. Think about staying at home or going to Ireland, for example, where you can travel with just ID and not with a passport.
Donald Trump says he will speak in Florida tomorrow following his arraignment later on criminal charges. The former US president will fly from his Mar-a-Lago estate to New York today after being indicted in relation to alleged hush money payments to the adult film star Stormy Daniels ahead of the 2016 election. Mr. Trump is due to be fingerprinted and photographed at the court in Manhattan tomorrow. His lawyer says he will enter a plea of not guilty. Russia's Wagner Group has claimed control of the eastern Ukrainian city of Bakhmut. The head of the mercenary group, Yevgeny Prigozhin, says troops raised the Russian flag over the administration building, claiming they'd taken the city from a legal point of view. Ukraine's military says Russian forces are still very far, though, from capturing the town. A woman has been arrested in Russia over the death of a prominent pro-war blogger in St. Petersburg. Vladlen Tatarsky was killed and at least 32 people injured in an explosion at a cafe yesterday. Russian investigators say they've detained Daria Trepova as a suspect. Now, Mr. Tatarsky was a vocal supporter of Russia's war in Ukraine. He embedded with troops and provided running commentary of the invasion. Jodie Comer and Paul Mescal won the top prizes for their West End debut performances at last night's Olivier Awards. Comer won Best Actress for her role as Tessa in a one-person production prima facie, while Mescal took home Best Actor for his role as Stanley Kowalski in the new stage adaptation of A Streetcar Named Desire. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
Well, the Prime Minister is shortly to announce the details of this new police task force. It's to tackle grooming gangs, and it's part of a series of measures being unveiled by the government to protect women and girls from sexual predators.
That's right. The plan will also include tougher sentences for members of grooming gangs, with the Prime Minister pledging not to let political correctness get in the way of a crackdown. Well, earlier on, GB News spoke to former detective of Greater Manchester Police, a woman who could frankly run this country, Maggie Oliver, on what it all means.
But what I fear, like Kelly, is that this is yet more rhetoric. It is all right saying, you know, we are going to crack down on these grooming gangs. We are going to bring in specialist officers. Well, as Kelly rightly says, you know, the police, the criminal justice system, CPS, the courts, they are on their knees. You know, we are not going to bring about the, you know, monumental changes that we need without investment, without proper training of police officers. You know, the sentencing is pitiful. The jails are full. Less than 2% of reported rapes and abuse ever reaches a court. So this, to me, you know, I have heard Priti Patel, I have had conversations with her, with Sajid Javid, saying the same things. I really hope that this is different, that these words convert into action. Louise Casey's report shines a spotlight on the Met. That could be any police force throughout the whole country. Policing is in crisis. There is a problem with attitudes, with cultures, with, you know, inexperienced officers. And, you know, we talk about a task force, which is great. But, you know, when I was in GMP, we had a serious sexual offences unit, which they closed down. Experienced police officers and detectives are leaving the police in their droves. Who is going to train a 19 or a 20-year-old recruit to deal with this? It's all very well to say the words. And I think my fear, to be honest, is this is, you know, a little bit of electioneering. We've got a general election coming up. The cat is out of the bag. I spoke about this 10 years ago, and you're quite right. When I started to speak out, you know, I was, I think, one of the very first people to say publicly that the grooming gangs were predominantly made up of Pakistani Muslim men. There is a problem within that culture that needs addressing, and we can't tiptoe around the edges and avoid dealing with it. But the last thing I would say is that the law in this country says a 12-year-old child or a 13-year-old child cannot have sex with a 50 or a 60-year-old man. That is against the law. So it doesn't matter for me where the abuser comes from. The law should be dealing with every single man, whether it's a priest in the Catholic Church, whether it is, you know, Jeffrey Epstein, or whether it is a Pakistani Muslim man. We need to throw the full weight of the law behind it. And, you know, a few words won't change the reality that these kids, as Kelly has said, have been judged.
Former Greater Manchester Police Officer Maggie Oliver there. She's brilliant,
Voice
isn't
of
she?
common sense, and she should be on that blooming task force, but she won't be.
No. Well, she has advised the government before. I'd like to think that somehow her influence is on this report. Well,
she'd ruffle feathers. She
would. Let's get more from our political reporter, Catherine Forster, this morning. Good morning, Catherine. I just want to read one of our viewers' comments to you. Owen has got in touch and said, Suella Braverman is exactly right. The tragedy is that it's taken so long for anyone to actually say it. If that captures the mood of the nation, the Conservatives will be very happy today.
Yes, they certainly will. There's a lot of tough talk coming from Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, from Home Secretary Suella Braverman about grooming gangs today. They are saying they need to forget about political correctness and cultural sensitivities and tackle this head on. Suella Braverman has, of course, pointed out that the grooming gangs specifically are often British Pakistani men. Now, they are rolling out a raft of measures. They are in Leeds this morning at an NSPCC hub. Then they're going across to Rochdale in Greater Manchester. Several measures being announced. First of all, a task force of specialist officers to go into areas with grooming gangs to help the police working there. Secondly, tougher sentencing at the court stage. Then mandatory reporting if people with professional obligations to children, people like teachers, police officers, social care workers, if they have evidence of grooming going on, they will have a legal duty to report that. And finally, mandatory ethnicity information to be recorded. Now, Labour are saying that this is a lot of what they've suggested for years and hasn't been done. Keir Starmer has been saying, yes, he agrees that political sensitivities shouldn't be a factor in this, but also pointing out that the majority of cases of child sexual abuse are in fact carried out by white men. But that is, of course, we live in the United Kingdom where only 14% of people come from ethnic minorities. But this is certainly a battle that the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister are happy to have, and especially just a few weeks from the local elections in May.
Timing's everything. That's Catherine Forster, our political correspondent at Westminster. Well, let's get more from the former Detective Superintendent at the Metropolitan Police. That's Shabnam Chowdhury, no stranger to this programme. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Andrew. Always a pleasure.
This has been flagged up for some time. Is it going to work, Shabnam? Do you see anything really positive and new in this, or is there just a bit of gimmickry about it?
I think it's a bit of both, but I think it's really important that the fact that they're talking about new laws to protect victims and actually hold others to account, i.e. teachers, social workers, anyone that is in those positions of trust where they are actually dealing with young children all the time, that they have a duty of care, a responsibility by law to actually call it out and to actually inform the appropriate agencies and to work together to prevent and to protect young children.
Read again, Shabnam, can I just read you one of the messages from one of our viewers? Sandra has said, I was a social worker for more than 20 years working in an area of Leeds which had a large Asian population, mainly from Pakistan. We tried at the time to help girls in care who were being targeted. You have to understand that in this community, the women are powerless to intervene. Even if they knew, they would always cover up for their sons or husbands. The women are very isolated, and when they try to say something, they can be in fear of their lives. I don't know if anything's changed. I hope so. Do you think anything has changed? And what do we do about that situation and those silenced women?
I think we talk about any cultural background where women are sort of, from, say, Asian black backgrounds where they are classed in some communities as second-class citizens. But look, this isn't just about Asian communities, and we talked about grooming gangs. 84% of sexual offences are committed by white British men. But I don't think we need to get into the backgrounds of all these people. The fact is, children need to be protected. But what I would say is, from cultural background, from my own experiences as a woman, you've got to be able to have the courage to stand up and to be able to call it out. I think in many communities, parents tend to protect their children, regardless of their background. And when you're talking about sexual abuse of other children, regardless of what background your parents are, you need to be able to. You have to be cruel to be kind in order to, ensure that your children are being apprehended if they are the ones that are the perpetrators.
Suella Braverman's been criticised by the Labour Party for what they call is dog whistle politics. They say she's inflaming racial tension. Isn't she right to say what a lot of people know, that the infamous grooming gangs were British Pakistani men?
I think she needs to work on the fact that there's been a commission that has actually been a review that's been commissioned by the Home Office that actually doesn't give that kind of data as to which ethnic background is more likely to be a perpetrator. But I think what she needs to do is stop being so divisive. That's my personal view, because I don't like a lot of what she says. The bottom line is that you've got to look at all backgrounds, and we're talking about collecting data on all different ethnicities. You can go to any part of the UK where demographically you might get more of an Asian background and more of a white background, more of a black community, and you've got to look at which sections of those community are more likely to be perpetrators in any crime.
In a way, in that case, Shabnam, do you take the statement today as a kind of empowerment for police officers to be colour blind, culture blind, to focus on the crime itself rather than the identity of the perpetrator?
Police officers and people from all those backgrounds need to be culturally competent and understand the difference of different communities. That does not mean protecting those communities when they are perpetrators of crime. So no, it's not a question of being colourblind or culturally blind. It's about being culturally competent and being completely and utterly professional, and regardless of somebody's background, and forget about what your career prospects are going to be if you call it out. The fact is, you need to be professional and you need to call out these people that are offending against young children.
Who should be on this task force?
That's a really good point, because I actually take on Maggie's points, really important. The fact is, there is so little experience across policing. There are some very good officers, but many of police officers have left that have got the kind of experience that I had as a serving officer. It's inexperienced officers. You can't get a young 19-year-old to go into a task force like this and start training them at a young age to spot the signs and to be able to support victims. There needs to be a good balance. And the fact is, you're going to end up taking all your experience from different pockets of policing and then leaving even less experience on the front line, which is a problem that they've got. And I think the other issue here is exactly what she said, is about the criminal justice system is broken. 1 in 70 victims as perpetrators are charged, and 1 in 100 are actually convicted. So it's not just policing, task force and bringing more people in. You've got to fix a system that's already broken in the first instance. Criminal justice, legal services, solicitors, prosecutors can't cope at the moment. So you might be bringing lots more in, but you're not actually supporting them. There needs to be more money and better funding.
You and Maggie Oliver should be on that task force, Shabnam.
Well, that's a really interesting point, because I tell you something, policing is so arrogant and ignorant. They won't bring back people that actually speak out, that actually have lived and breathed and got those experiences because they think they're better than what they are. Actually, they would benefit from the experiences of the likes of Maggie. I don't care if they don't take me. Take other former officers that have that experience and start working with them, and allow your serving officers to go out and do business as usual.
OK, fantastic. You're so right. Former Detective Superintendent at the Met.
She should be on the task force as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to come to some of your views. We were talking about cashless Britain in relation to these hideous, torturous parking apps that a lot of you don't like. And Dave says, we've got a corner shop locally, which I rarely use, as he has a £5 minimum spend on credit card. Some businesses prefer cash to avoid card charges. So true. And Arnold says, I hate the cashless society. If young people want to pay on an app, good for them. However, I like to put my money in a ticket machine and put it in my car window to make sure it's right.
And lots on Trump too. John Prezi says, Andrew and Beverley, Biden's idiotic party have made a big mistake of prosecuting Donald Trump. I can't see anything stopping him now from being the next president. I don't know if he'll be the next president, but I think he'll be the next Republican candidate.
Oh, he will be. And
that's the end of DeSantis, who I thought had a real chance of winning.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, this was Greg Swenson's. We didn't talk about this actually, but last time he was on, he said he thought the policy of the Democrats was in order to galvanise so much support behind Trump that it would marginalise Ron DeSantis, because they think that if Ron DeSantis was the candidate that he would probably win.
And of course, will Biden really stand again if he can't even come across the Atlantic for the coronation?
He can't even stand up, never mind stand as president.
Does he know his name? Does he know who he is?
Yeah, I mean...
he's a doddery old duffer.
Surely not. Do you know what? It's going to be an interesting 18 months, though, isn't it? With a British election on the horizon and an American election. We're very lucky to sit here and talk to you about all of this.
Yeah.
How do you pronounce that? Niamh.
That's Irish. That's Irish. That's Neve.
Neve. It's Neve. I knew Neve. Neve, thank you, has said it isn't tenuous. Ultimately, this is about Trump's indictment. It is a federal offence to pay someone to keep quiet over information that might affect an election. It's very clear that he did that. It's time to pay the price for his actions.
Well, he might, because, of course, he's going to be charged tomorrow, all of which will be in some form of camera or maybe even broadcast live. Now, still to come, we're going to be discussing... What are we going to be discussing? We're going to be discussing the beginning of the tax year.
Oh, no.
Because it started, and what it means for the pound in your pocket with our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan.
Luckily, it's Liam.
Who we love. You're with GB News.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Now, it's the beginning of April, which means it's the start of a new tax year. That means all kinds of changes to household bills, benefits and taxation.
The cost of living crisis is ongoing, with annual inflation still above 10% and food prices rising at an even faster rate. But energy bills and council tax may also be going up.
So who better to tell us what it all means than our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, with On the Money.
Oh, Liam, give me some good news.
There's a huge amount of economics and business news around today, really. But
household energy bills, big news.
We do need to get our head around this. It's not great news. Now, you'll have heard a couple of weeks ago, the government announced, or Ofgem announced, that the cap on the average household energy bill, I've put it in a graphic here for GB News TV viewers, and I'll outline it for radio listeners. The cap on average household bills is staying at £2,500 a year. There were concerns it was going to go up to £3,000. So that you think, oh, that's great, so energy bills aren't going to go up anymore. But, what's also happening today, it's the end of the across-the-board £400 payment help with energy bills that was automatically deducted that all households have been getting. So that now ends. So household energy bills are going to go up, even though the cap is staying where it is. Right. And wholesale prices are going to come down. Don't shoot the messenger. For those on benefits, over the next year, there's going to be in 3 instalments around £800 of annual support for household energy bills. And we must say, I say this all the time, if you are having trouble with your household energy bills, tell your supplier. Phone them up. Get an email exchange. Get an email exchange. They'll have an emergency email. Once you've told them and they've acknowledged that you've told them, it's much harder for them to cut you off. And if you're on a prepayment meter under current emergency legislation, they can't cut you off either. That should just be the last thing there. So tell your supplier if you are in.
I guess the fact we're going into milder weather helps a bit.
It does, and hopefully there will be some more easing in wholesale energy markets. I'm going to come to that in a moment. Look, it has been really tough. One good bit of news, actually, is that the UK government is facilitating the creation of some LNG landing platforms. What does that mean? We've been getting a lot of our gas over recent months, particularly since the war in Ukraine, not from Norway, where we usually get it. That's carried on. And, of course, not from Russia, at least a lot less from Russia, still some. That's another story. We've been getting gas from Qatar, from America. So this is gas in those LNG ships.
This is liquid gas?
With the, liquefied natural gas with the big bubbles. You've often seen them on the television. And then we've got these landing platforms. You don't have to build new docks where these ships can dock sort of at sea or just like on piers. And then they can convert the liquid natural gas into actual gas and then pipe it onshore. That is one bit of good news.
Clever, isn't it?
It's really, and Britain is at the forefront of this.
Right.
We have the most LNG landing platforms of any economy in Europe.
Really? Interesting.
Is that because we've got such terrible storage facilities for gas?
That's partly it, Bev. You and I have talked about this before. We haven't got nearly enough storage, though the Rough undersea storage facility, which Centrica was letting be made obsolete. They've done a deal with the government, and that will now start to be used again. Right. But we are very short of gas storage.
And also, we've got to talk to you about what changes to taxes now.
Indeed. So it is the beginning of the new tax year at the moment, and that means that there are lots and lots of changes. Here's a bit of good news. Again, I've got it on a graphic. The living wage, that's pretty much the same thing as the minimum wage, and this is for people above 23 years old, is going up 92p from today to £10.42 an hour. Do you remember, Andrew, it wasn't so long ago when Labour was saying we need a £10 an hour minimum wage. Well, that's what inflation does. We're now at £10.42 an hour. So, of course, Labour is saying we need a £15 minimum wage. That will be one of the key battlegrounds of the next general election. £15 minimum wage, good or bad for the economy. On the downside, council tax across the country is going up by roughly 5%.
Is that the cap? You can go no higher than 5%, isn't that right?
That's right. So they're going the full amount.
Of course they are.
Because, of course, the cap becomes the floor. That's what eventually happens. Just like student loans, up to £9,000. Yeah. In fact, they're all £9,000.
Yeah.
So that's an average of about £100 extra on the average Band D house across the country. At the same time, you know, our broadband, our mobile, our water bills, all the bills we have with private companies, many of them will be linked to the RPI, the Retail Price Index, rather than CPI. So they're going to start going up between 8, 10 or 12%. Again, don't shoot the messenger. And then corporation tax is going up from 19 to 25%.
Madness.
Now, there's a lot of spin from government, and I see a lot of broadcasters parroting it today. and some of it's true, saying that, oh, there's going to be more investment because there's going to be more allowances, capital allowances for companies. Yeah, if you're a massive firm with deep pockets that can borrow to build a lot more equipment, not if you're a small firm.
And not if you're a service industry.
And not if you're a service industry, because they don't actually make big investments in pieces of equipment.
And isn't 80-odd% of our economy, isn't it, service?
It is indeed. It is indeed. So I'm concerned about this corporation tax rise. I've been highlighting it here on GB News for a long time. Tomorrow, actually, I've got a special report I'm bringing to GB News from Birmingham. I spent the back end of last week in Birmingham, talked to lots of manufacturers, not just about the corporation tax rise, but also, Andrew and Bev, about the fact that, something I haven't mentioned here, from today, all UK companies, unless they're really energy-intensive companies like steelmakers or something, they won't get any help with their energy bills. And many of these companies, their energy bills have already tripled, and they're going to go up even more. And a lot of manufacturers across the Midlands, across those red wall seats, 30, 40, 50% of their cost base is their utility bill. And those utility bills now are going to be completely unsupported. And this is going to become a major issue. And I did an exclusive interview with Andy Street, the West Midlands mayor, who's actually, he's taking a little pop at the government on this and the Treasury, saying that they may need to change their ways.
Well, he's very independent-minded, isn't he?
He is very independent.
And quite outspoken, of course, what's happening at John Lewis, as he used to run it.
He certainly is. He certainly is. The other thing I wanted to mention, and again, we could easily be leading the news on this, is the oil price. Now, the oil price has jumped up 8% overnight.
Why?
It's jumped up because you have the OPEC exporters cartel. They control 40% of global oil production, led by the Saudis, but you've also got, UAE, you've got Qatar, you've got Iran, Iraq, Mexico, Nigeria, lots of big oil exporters. And they seem to be kind of aligning a bit more with Russia. I mean, Russia isn't part of OPEC, but this OPEC Plus group, OPEC Plus, the Russians acting together, they've decided, even though global economy is heating up and the oil price has been going up a lot lately, they've decided to cut another 1 million barrels a day from global production. That's about 1%, on top of the 2 million barrel cut that we saw a couple of months ago, to drive the price up so they make more money.
They've literally got us over a barrel.
They literally have us over a barrel, because OPEC, it only controls 40% of output, but if you combine it with the Russians, they control 90% of global oil reserves.
So that could wreck the government's entire anti-inflation strategy of getting it down to...
I don't think it will wreck it. I don't think it will wreck it. It could certainly damage and dent it, because the price of oil, it's not just obviously about petrol and diesel. It's everything. Plastics, transport, freight. It impacts everything. So this is a major turning of the geopolitical screw by the Saudis. Joe Biden is saying, we must act against this. This is bad news. But look, the sort of US-Saudi alliance, which has underpinned geopolitics since the Second World War, is showing signs of cracking, partly linked, I'm afraid, to the war in Ukraine. So all this geopolitical stuff, it sounds like the academic middle common room discussions, is going to impact you when you fill up your car or van. That's how economics works.
You make economics, which is a dry subject for most people, fascinating.
Well, when I get a bit of time, I can tell people stuff they need to know.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what? Build back better, Liam. Nothing's getting built, nothing's come back, and nothing is better.
Come on, Bev, cheer up.
When's it going to happen? When is Build Back Better going to start?
I tell you what's really good.
When are we going to get out of this?
I tell you what's really good, right? I tell you what's really good. We just avoided recession, right? On Friday, I was up in Birmingham, so I don't think we didn't report it as much maybe as we would have if I was screaming about it in the newsroom, as I often do. But the GDP numbers showed that we did grow in the final quarter of 2022. We did avoid recession. We had the Bank of England, the Office of Budget Responsibility, not just the Labour front bench, but practically the whole of the Twitter sphere, experts all saying, we're going into recession. We didn't go into recession. We avoided that 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth.
Why didn't the government trumpet the news?
You tell me. A
positive headline.
They should have been trumpeting the news. But the reason we didn't go into recession, right, was our manufacturing sector. These doughty, resilient, small and medium-sized companies, often family-owned, often big employers in their small towns. We still have a manufacturing heartland in this country, and it's suffering now. It's got this double whammy today of a corporation tax rise and an end to support for their energy bills. But they are strong, resilient companies, and they will see us through.
Liam, thank you so much. Right, still to come. The NHS have been warned that treatment delays risk harming thousands of children. We'll find out more after your morning news with Aaron Armstrong.
Hi there, it's 11:33. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister is expected to reveal a raft of new measures to tackle grooming gangs shortly and has vowed political correctness will no longer hamper authorities. The NSPCC's warned excessively focusing on race could create new blind spots when tackling child sexual abuse. It comes after the Home Secretary singled out British Pakistani men as a particular concern. The man who murdered the 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell in Liverpool is being sentenced. Later, Thomas Cashman was found guilty of killing the schoolgirl as he chased a convicted drug dealer into her home in August last year. He was also found guilty of wounding with intent of her mother, Cheryl Corbell, and the attempted murder of Joseph Nee, the man he was chasing. Teachers in England will go on strike for another 2 days next term after rejecting the latest government pay offer. They'll walk out on the 27th of April and the 2nd of May. 98% of NEU members voted against what they described as an insulting offer. It amounted to a £1,000 one-off payment, plus an average rise of 4.5% for most staff next year. Almost 1 million passport applications could face delays in processing because of industrial action. More than 1,000 passport office workers across 8 sites have walked off the job for 5 weeks from today. The Public and Commercial Services Union say it will have a significant impact, and their General Secretary has written to the government calling for urgent talks to resolve the dispute. A woman's been arrested in Russia over the death of a prominent pro-war blogger, Vladlen Tatarsky, in St. Petersburg. He was killed in an explosion at a cafe yesterday. At least 32 people were injured. Mr. Tatarsky was a vocal supporter of the war in Ukraine. He embedded with troops and provided running commentary of the invasion. Russian investigators say Daria Trepova is the suspect they have detained. TV online, DAB, digital and tune-in radio, this is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
And a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2357 and 1.1381 euros. The price of gold, £1,594 and 69 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is at 76.82.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for physical investment.
Let us know your thoughts on all of our talking points today. Email us gbviews@gbnews.uk. Still to come, we're asking, could Australia be on the path to become a republic? Find out in a minute.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, it's 11:40. You're with To The Point on GB News.
We're going through those papers again. They're back by popular acclaim. Sarah Vine of Daily Mail fame.
And Bushra Sheikh.
Bushra Sheikh.
Is also here.
Of GB News fame. NHS, come on. Well, it's not good
well,
news,
your
is it?
piece today was great.
Oh, thank you.
But I think someone should say this, but Andrew's written a really good piece about lefty...
the takeover of the BMA, militant. I mean, basically turning the junior doctor strike into a way to turn back the tide on the Thatcher trade union reforms of the 80s, make it a bit political, all about socialism.
Yeah.
They've got one of the breakaway unions has got a hammer and sickle effectively as its logo.
Yeah.
It's pretty flipping appalling.
It's pretty hardcore.
And 175,000 procedures were cancelled during the 3 days of junior doctor strikes in March. There's 4 this time, straight after the bank holiday, one day after another, and withdrawing emergency cover.
But the point you're making in your piece is that they don't care about the patients.
They don't. They're very rude about it.
Very politically motivated. And you said that these guys were voted in on a very small percentage
1%.
of the vote.
1%.
So
no, it's here. I'll just find it. Karen.
Well, so politics has infected the NHS, is what I'm saying, in a kind of quite a bad way. That's not to say that, there aren't huge problems, but it's quite an interesting...
Can we just say on a website called Reddit, where these junior doctors hold forth, bleep, 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 this, bleep, 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 more than anything else, F the NHS. They go on about, don't guilt-trip me with your cancers anymore. I sincerely, deeply hope the whole damn thing collapses. A lot of that. Junior doctors on a Reddit website talking to each other, thinking that people like me won't get to find these tweets. Yeah. And it's appalling. I'm not saying of course, the majority won't be like that.
No, of course, no.
But it's the activists who've got control, and a lot of them are ex-members of Momentum, which, of course, was the Corbynite movement set up to protect Jeremy Corbyn's leadership. So they're entryists.
So it just feels like the NHS, at some level, is being hijacked by this kind of hardline left-wing politics. The whole... I mean, that's not to say that these operations being cancelled has anything to do with it, but it just goes to show how sort of complex this situation is and how difficult it really is. The government's doing about it.
The latest shocking figures, Bushra, today is the fact that there are nearly 15,000 children waiting for procedures. They had operations that were postponed in 2022, and Dr. Camilla Kingdom, President of the Royal College of Paediatrics, has said that delaying a child's operation risks having a lifelong impact on their development. This will move people, won't it, the idea that children are being neglected in this way?
Absolutely, and I do stand by it, that I was trying to understand that I get that, there is this crisis of pay,
and people should be paid fairly. But my concern was that it was about putting the patient's needs first. Ultimately, that is what the NHS is predicated on. It is about that. And are we losing sight of that? Because I certainly do not want these children to miss out on these very much needed appointments, you know, and that balance seems to lost, and there is a political agenda here, but there has to be another way to do this.
They're also arguing, the BMA, that their pay has fallen way behind inflation in that since 2008, and they put out a statement saying you could earn more as a barista in Pret-a-Manger, because they paid £14.10, junior doctors paid £14.09. Now, the independent checking service, Fact Check, said absolutely not true. You will not find a junior doctor anywhere in Britain on £14.09 an hour, because they work weekends, they work longer hours, shifts, nothing like it. So probably closer to £20 to £30 an hour. So that's very misleading of the BMA to be using that sort of propaganda.
It's true. And when I actually came across that in the paper, I was really confused because I didn't have any idea. I was thinking, surely this cannot be true, because on one hand you've got just a barista and you have a doctor, and these doctors are, you know,
well, it isn't.
helping people's lives, and it's not true.
I'd believe Fact Check rather than the BMA, because it is an independent checking service.
The bottom line is patients are suffering. I mean, that's what this is about. I mean, I'm sure that these cancellations will have also something to do with lockdown and the effect of COVID, which, you know, we've discussed endlessly, which should never have happened. But also, you know, we're not training any doctors. I mean, I've got a friend whose daughter wanted to go and do medicine. She was turned down. She's got 3 A stars.
No.
You can't get a place at university to do medicine because I don't know why there's some they don't want to pay for the training or whatever it is. I mean, but the point is that the whole system is completely broken. And I honestly think Sunak is obviously into tackling difficult subjects, as we've seen today with the whole Grooming Gang thing. I think he should bite this. I think he should grasp this thorn and say, look, the NHS needs a total reset.
It does.
It needs a complete reset. We need to rethink, go back to the drawing board.
Also, if you think about it, years and years ago, becoming a nurse and becoming a doctor, there was a different credential that was kind of attached to it personally. You did it out of care for
vocation.
humans.
It was a vocation.
Yes. So it's like, whilst I get people have bills to pay, I feel like the caring part of it has gone.
I think also my experience, I was saying, of the NHS on Thursday evening when I ended up at A&E with my son with his broken collarbone, is that the A&E department, it turns out the urgent care department, was just full of people who could have gone to a GP. And the problem was they said, well, these people can't get GP appointments. So everyone's just using the hospital.
I mean, I need to see my GP and they've given me an appointment for the 20th of April.
This year or next year?
This year, thank goodness.
Well, something.
But the point is, I just think that, you know, Rishi is doing stuff that is difficult. He's making that his sort of trademark, which I think is really admirable because nobody ever does anything difficult in politics because it's, you know, it's all about short-termism and everything. Let's tackle this really big problem, which is that the NHS needs total reset.
Yes, what it was created for and to do in 1948 has changed completely.
We need some sort of cross-party, you know, committee to work out what the way forward is, because it's just not working on so many different levels.
Yeah, and these strikes are going to make it so much worse. 4 days straight after a bank holiday as well, which is really cynical.
Yeah.
Right, ladies and gentlemen,
thank you.
Moving on. Could Australia be on the path to becoming a republic, Bushra? What's this story about?
This is really interesting, actually, because this comes to light. And actually, what it's saying is it actually happened after the Queen's death. So there are a lot more Australians that feel like they can go republic. So maybe there is this independence. Although they are going to need a lot of votes, and I think it's twice the amount, and Australia isn't quite there yet. However, there are a few other countries that are considering it too, places like Jamaica and Antigua that are also considering the independence. So if they go down that road, then perhaps
Barbados
more
did it very recently, didn't they?
Yes, they did, which means that they might then get then the public's opinion may change.
Send William and Kate down under for a few weeks because people like them.
I think it's interesting. This is all about how brilliant the Queen was. Because a lot of people loved the Queen and they just loved her as an individual and they didn't... I think even people who were sort of Republicans or who weren't really into the monarchy loved the Queen. You know,
Yeah.
she had that sort of star quality. I think Charles hasn't had enough time to get that sort of following, and whether he will or not, I don't know.
And also with the whole Harry and Meghan story, it's cast an entire shadow over the royal family in Australia. People are fed up of it, and because of that, they're actually questioning:
Because it's probably all they hear about the royal family now
Yes.
is the fallout from that wretched couple
Yes.
in their millionaire's house in California, and we still don't know if they're going to the coronation, and still that's all people are talking
And
about.
of course,
isn't it?
Australia's now got Anthony Albanese, this new Prime Minister, who is a committed Republican,
Yeah, he
isn't he?
is.
He's very opposed to the monarchy. I think one of the first things he did in government was to create a minister for the Republic or something, didn't he? To look into whether they needed a royal family association or not.
But they should just remember, when Charles and Camilla were in Germany, they were standing next to the President of Germany and his wife, and everyone asked a question here, what's the name of the President of Germany? None of us knew. None of us knew, because they're obscure grey men quite often, or obscure grey women, whereas the King... Everyone knows who our king is.
Yeah,
everybody.
yeah, it's true. It's true.
Worldwide, as did the Queen, which is why they're a great ambassador for the country, I think.
Right, from famous women to the ordinary Stevenage woman, Sarah.
Yes.
Who is Stevenage
I don't
woman,
know,
and why
but
are we all talking about her?
Well, because apparently Keir Starmer has got to win her over if he's going to win the next election. The question really is does Stevenage woman have a penis?
Yes,
Because
very good point.
Keir Starmer isn't entirely clear on what
Yes.
the woman is, and he thinks that some of them might have penises.
Yeah.
So, sorry to say penis in the morning.
And he's not sure if only women can have a cervix.
Exactly. So I think that he has a little bit of work to do, perhaps, on that front.
It was famously Worcester woman they had to win.
Yes.
Was that in the 1990s? Blair had to win Worcester woman.
I mean, I don't know why they put these random geographical labels.
She's a woman in her 40s, works, married, disillusioned with politics, fed up with a lot of them, and that's who they're going to try and win.
I think whether you're from Stevenage or, Stoke-on-Trent, if you're a woman, what you care about is your children, education, the NHS, the cost of living...
None of which is pretty good.
Crime.
I
mean, they're not. These are not complicated issues. I mean, and also I think it's slightly patronising to assume that only women in Stevenage. I mean, I hate the way political think tanks do this.
Yeah, they do. It is quite sexist, isn't it?
It's Labour Together. This is this think tank, and they found that Stevenage woman basically has the election in their hands, Bushra. Apparently, Stevenage woman is the largest voter group in 88 of the top 100 Conservative and Labour marginal seats.
Oh, wow, OK, that's...
So, you're in your 40s, just?
Yep.
It's you.
It's you.
It's me.
So what do they need to do for you? It says a woman who's working with kids, who basically feels a little bit disengaged from the maelstrom of daily politics. You don't feel that. You're very engaged. But she holds the balance of power in her hands.
Yeah, I think you know what it is. This is going to be about schools, you're right, but good schools and accessibility to those schools and how we get our kids to those schools. So that's the first thing. Then also... as like a working mum as well, there are certain things that I would require, which would be the childcare element of it, after school clubs, what that looks like as well, to make my life easier as well. So it's all about the lifestyle of the working mother. You know, how is that going to look? Because we want our lives to look easier. And if Labour can do that for us, then you'll have our...
Well, the Tories have already done it with their childcare stuff in the budget.
Which was very innovative, and it was literally nicking Labour's clothes, a lot of people said. I mean, some of it was Labour ideas, but that's the great advantage if you're in government. You can cherry-pick the bits you like from Labour.
Absolutely.
I mean, one of the things as working mothers we need to do is get around in our cars, let's be honest. That's one of the things that we'd quite like to be able to do, is to be able to drive our kids around and not have to put them on bicycles all the time.
Yes.
Right, Bushra, bid to silence gunman in jail. What's this story about?
Right, this is... OK, so this is something that I had to get my head around a little bit. So this is all about a drug gang. So all of this is actually linked to a much bigger story. So this is a £250 hit on the killer, on Olivia Pratt's killer.
250,000.
No, so it's I think it's £250,000 with a hit on the killer of Olivia Pratt's killer. Unfortunately, because of that 9-year-old child.
Terrible story.
And it's absolutely awful, because what it's saying is actually they were in the middle of an area that this gang was involved in. So they almost got hit in the crossfire of it all. And now, obviously, there is a bid to have him silenced, because he will and can tell all the people that are above him in this gang. So it's a much deeper story than what we've heard.
And it's extraordinary that this gang has so much power. It can operate behind the bars of the prison.
Terrible. Well, I mean, gangs have always operated behind the bars of prisons.
Yeah.
That's not unusual. But the thing is, what this murder of this poor child has done has shone a light on the degree to which that area is run by these gangs. And one of the reasons this guy is in jail, or will be, I think he's being sentenced today.
He is being sentenced today, yeah. For a long time, I hope.
Is that his girlfriend? Is that his girlfriend testified against him very bravely, and
hugely courageous.
And the police have said they've never seen anyone. They've said that she's one of the most brave witnesses they've ever seen because the death threats against her are just colossal.
And they're going to have to put her in the witness protection programme so she can live anonymously somewhere. But these gangs could find her.
Liverpool is in the grip of this sort of, I mean, almost. I mean, it's like something out of a sort of movie in the 70s, isn't it?
It's cinematic. Is the idea that £250,000 is on his head?
Yeah, but what's more frightening is the police knows about that they have this information and letting regular families live in the middle of it.
I know, and a mum opens her door because she hears a commotion outside, and her 9-year-old is slain by you couldn't conceive it, and that's how ordinary families being dragged into this terrible gang warfare. I hope he goes down and gets a full life sentence.
I hope
doesn't come out.
I'm sure. I would have imagined
because there'd be public outrage.
Did you see his sister was in court giving the finger to the...
She was charming, wasn't she?
Unbelievable.
Disrespectful and rude.
And his girlfriend, who turned up looking like some sort of Love Island contestant.
She did actually. Yes.
You read about that in your column.
Yeah. You did write about that in your column.
Was a bit much.
Yeah. Well, that's the end of our show, I think.
Thank you.
You're going to be back with us next Monday.
We will.
It's flown by again. Coming up next, GB News Live with Mark Longhurst. This is To The Point with Andrew and Bev. We're going to be back tomorrow at...
We're going to be back at 9:30. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Bushra. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you.
Right, have a great day. See you tomorrow.
Hello, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office. Following, for some parts of the south, the dullest March on record today. Plenty of April sunshine, light winds, dry for the vast majority as high pressure over Scandinavia builds towards the UK, keeping weather systems away for the time being and keeping sunny skies in place for much of the country. That sunshine extending from Scotland into England and Wales, just some patchy cloud about here. Northern Ireland seeing a bit more cloud, I think, and a fresher breeze, but for the vast majority, it's dry, it's bright, and with the sunny skies and the light winds, feeling pleasantly warm, 11 to 14 Celsius for most. Now into the evening, under those clear skies, temperatures will fall away and it could be a few mist and fog patches forming here and there. But for the vast majority, it is a clear night, and as a result, it's a frosty night with temperatures dipping to +1 down to -3 Celsius across central and eastern parts. I think for western Scotland and Northern Ireland, here we'll see thicker cloud and by dawn, a few outbreaks of mostly light rain into the Western Isles. That's skirting Caithness, Sutherland and then arriving into Orkney later in the morning. Northern Ireland, a few bits of rain in the far